Welcome to the Fighting on Film podcast, the podcast all about classic and obscure war movies, from the Normandy landings to the days of chivalry and swords. If it's been captured on film, we're going to try and cover it. I'm Robbie of RM Military History.
I'm Matthew Moss of Historical Firearms and the Armourer's Bench.
Hello, welcome back to Fighting on Film. Now, this week, in lieu of a horror film, as it's nearly Halloween, spooky, we're doing another shocker to some with 2014's The Monuments Men.
Oh, I like that. That was a good intro.
That's all off the top of the dome,
You have that planned. That was good.
No, that was all off the dome.
Pros. Marvellous. Yes. Contentious one, this one. You know what? It's almost as contentious as a film that came out around the same time, Fury, I would say.
Yeah. I forget this is in that Sony leak era where everything around 2014-13 got leaked.
Yeah.
So we threatened it a few weeks ago. If you heard,
we did.
We gave our takes then, and they might have changed. Actually, to be fair, we'll see. It's an interesting film to say the least. So I think I'll start with production, give you an overview, and then Matt will do cast as we do. So this one's directed by George Clooney. Started his directing career in 2002 with Confessions of a Dangerous Mind, 2005's Good Night and Good Luck, which he also received an Oscar nomination for Best Director. 2008 Leatherheads, which is an American sports comedy about the early NFL. And then The Ides of March in 2011. I'm not doing films post Monuments Men at the moment, just because, we'd be here forever. The film was co-written by Clooney and Grant Heslov, an actor, director, writer, and producer who frequently works with Clooney on his directing credits. But his individual credits include 2012's Argo. He directed The Men That Stare at Goats, which is a film we could do on the show. That's an interesting one.
Yeah.
And both men acted as Monuments Men's producers, with the script being based upon the 2009 book, The Monuments Men, by Robert M. Eden and Brett Witter. Cinematography was by Thaden Papamichael, a two-time Oscar-nominated Greek cinematographer. His credits include 2005's Walk the Line, 2007's 3:10 to Yuma, 2013's Nebraska with Bruce Dern. It's a great film if anyone hasn't seen it. And more recently, 2023's Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. I know Matt went to see that.
I did, and we didn't talk about it at the time because of the strikes. And the preamble to that is set during the war, so we could technically talk about Indiana Jones and his interactions with Nazis on the pod in a theoretical future episode. But I will say that the cinematography on the film was very good.
Yes, and the cinematography in this is absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong with it at all. And we'll talk about more along that ilk as we go along. It's co-produced by Columbia Pictures, Fox 2000 Pictures, and a German studio, Babelsberg, and Clooney's own Smokehouse Pictures. And it was distributed by Sony in the US and 20th Century Fox everywhere else. It's filmed in March 2013 at the Babelsberg Studios in Germany, with support from the German Film Fund, with many locations in the Berlin-Brandenburg area. The mines around Bad Grud were used for location sequences, and scenes at the airfield in the UK were shot at IWM Duxford in Kent. Little fact on that one: Memphis Belle features in the background of the Duxford sequence, which is a lovely little
another
reference.
plane which I couldn't identify because you just catch the tail of it. Look like
but it is apparently Memphis Belle.
Yeah, that's cool,
which is nice. And this one's interesting because it was originally scheduled for a Christmas 2013 release to put it in awards contention for that year. But it was pushed back to 2014, and it was eventually released in early February. Now, I found about three reasons for this, and not. So I think it's an amalgamation of all three rather than one being
right.
That's what I think anyway. So one was the CGI wasn't completed on time, and Clooney was quoted in the LA Times at the time saying, "We just didn't have enough time. If any of the effects look cheesy, the whole movie would look cheesy. We simply don't have enough people to work enough hours to finish it." Which I thought, okay, fair enough. You're not crunching your crew, like fair play, because that can happen in the industry. It does happen quite a lot. Secondly, there seems to be issues with the final edit, trying to get that tone right between the comedic and serious themes, and as well, which is another key factor, I assume, was the composer Alexandre Desplat not having recorded the score in time for the December release date. So that's
That's kind of fundamental. Yeah.
quite a concoction, yeah. I mean, they could
Yeah.
have gone on YouTube
You need
Studio
a
and
score. You
just
definitely do need a score.
got some free to play music.
Some MIDI,
Yeah,
soundtracks over it. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, to be fair, the soundtrack's fine, exactly.
We'll throw the Medal of Honor soundtrack over it. That'll be fine.
Would have worked. So the budget was $70 to $90 with 155 million taken at the box office. Hard to say if it was profitable. I think it probably just about broke even. But then when you factor in marketing, it may not have even made a profit. And the movie was panned at the time. I remember it coming out and being quite panned, and not in the same way Fury was. Fury was quite well received, but this one seemed to get all the flack. And there were leaked emails, as we mentioned earlier in the show, about that Sony leak between Clooney and Sony chair Amy Pascal. And it showed that Clooney was really upset by the reviews. And I've got a snippet from the emails that he sent. It says, "It's getting worse. I need protection from all the reviews. Let's just make it a hit. I haven't slept in 30 hours and it's 7 a.m.
Oof.
I know.
Poor George.
And on that note, let's look at one of those retro reviews. Couldn't help it. I panned that. So this comes from Mark Commode, extremely famous British reviewer. I think it might be the first time we've had a Mark Commode review on the show, actually.
He's very welcome to join us anytime.
Oh, we'd love to have you on, Mark, if you're listening. Bring Sam and Mayo along with you as well.
Absolutely.
And this comes from February 16th, 2014, and I've cut it down for flow. It's about 3 paragraphs. So he says, look at the famous faces adorning the posters for the Second World War caper, and it's hard to figure out whether they're meant to be stony-faced or ever so slightly smirking. The same is true of the film, which wobbles uneasily between twinkly smiles and schmaltzy frowns, struggling to decide just how seriously to take its subject matter. The message is clear. Fight people and they fight back. Destroy their culture and they cease to exist. And neither Clooney nor co-writer Grant Heslov is afraid to say this out loud, assuring no one misses the point. In The Monuments Men, words speak louder than action. Yet the tonal uncertainty undermines complete engagement, taking the edge off both the drama and comedy, leaving the film floundering episodically in no man's land. A revisionist Hollywood hodgepodge, easy on the eye, gentle on the heart, light on the head. And that has a few reviews like that at the time.
Yeah, I read a couple myself, and it was pretty much panned by historians at the time. Around historical accuracy, it was considered broadly okay in sort of approach, but not really in the detail. We'll talk about this towards final thoughts and stuff. But to me, it seems not only is it tonally, a bit of a shapeshifter, but also in terms of production as well. Like some things are done really well, and then other things seem a little bit rushed, which you alluded to earlier.
Yeah, and I think I sort of echo that, Matt. But I think the one-word reviews will show that as well. So we had 90 odd responses. Thanks for the engagement again, guys. We love hearing what you think. So I'm just going to pick a few out random
on Twitter. I mean, X.
Please do. X, yep. Check us out if you don't. And these are in no particular order. And some are longer than one word, but it's our show. Do what the hell we want. So the Damcasters pod goes with Fart, F, parentheses, close parentheses, art. Philip Blood went with a more than a few words, but they are very good. So he said, citing a sentence from my Arkin manuscript, the film is a travesty for the history of the stolen art and a dreadful distortion of what happened in Arkin, which I tend to agree with. That they jump away from anywhere that you could pin historically quite quickly, I feel.
That's fair. They kind of go to places, nod to them, and then move on.
Yeah, it's like a greatest hits of Northwest Europe for a little bit. So it's like, oh look, Normandy Beach. Oh look, there's the bridge from Ramagen in the background. Oh no, too late. He was gone. So continue the one-word reviews. We have Al Murray just went, which I quite liked. Tom McCall put abject. Seri Thomas, he didn't put any spaces, so it counts. Not as bad as World on Fire. Mary Brazier went with meh. Adam Christiansen said too many chefs in the kitchen. AD Bond goes with floundering. Bill 1940 medal campaign flawed. Dave Current goes with disappointing. Peter Doyle simply says shite. And Ian McKellen, to round us off, goes with twee. But there were many, 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 many more that
And the
were
general
not
consensus seems
nice.
to have been that everyone thought that it was a little bit subpar.
Meandering to poor, I think would be fair. Like a cynic would
Yeah,
be like, it was fucking shit. Um, but
yeah,
and it's hard. We're going to jump in earlier final thoughts territory, but it is like that. And I've seen it 3 times now. I watched it when it came out, and I thought, it's all right, because I knew nothing about the Monuments Men.
yeah.
But the more that you delve into their history, and there are some fantastic lectures, documentaries out there on the Monuments Men, like what they did was incredible.
Mm.
But this movie does just boil it down to 6 bumbling over the hill men bumbling around
Yeah,
Northwest
for
Europe.
the comedic sort of
Yeah, yeah,
aspect of it, isn't it? I
mm.
suppose on that note, cast.
Yeah. Cast.
So, as we know, George Clooney not only directed and wrote the screenplay, but he was also the lead of the film. And he plays Lieutenant Frank Stokes, who is based loosely on George L. Stout. And of course, George has been in The Thin Line, Three Kings, 2000 teleplay of Failsafe, which I would
Yep.
love to see. The Man Who Stare at Goats, sorry, The Men Who Stare at Goats, which we mentioned earlier, Catch 22 in 2019, and he's won 2 Oscars. Then
Yep.
we've got Matt Damon, who plays Lieutenant James Granger, who's loosely based apparently on James Rorimer. And he's been in a number of military, sort of. What I'm going to do is, because these people have been in so many films, I'm just going to try and just keep it to the sort of military-esque
Yeah, of
sort of
course. I mean,
area as we
I think
normally do.
people know what George Clooney's been in. These are huge actors.
He is.
This
And
isn't
that's why
some
if people go,
hackneyed
why is he just
ensemble.
mentioning like 3 films? It's because
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
trying
yeah.
to
We do
dial
it
it in
all
a
the
little
time
bit.
on the show. It's fine.
Yeah,
People
this
know
is
by now.
literally just for new listeners. Matt Damon, he was in Geronimo, an American Legend, which we did a show and tell about a little while ago.
He's in Geronimo. Wow, I never knew
Well,
that.
he had like a very small role.
Okay.
Saving Private Ryan in 1998, of course, the Bourne movies, Green Zone in 2010, and he's won 1 Oscar. Then we got Bill Murray. He was in Stripes in 1981. He was in Space Jam in 1996.
Yes, thanks, Matt.
Garfield in 2004. The Greatest Beer Run Ever in 2022. And of course, he's been nominated for 1 Oscar.
Yeah.
Then we've got John Goodman, whose character Walter Garfield is based on Walter Hancock. And Goodman was in early in his career. This one's for Rob. Was in an episode of Equalizer.
Yes, he was. That's a great episode.
He was
He
also
gets tricked into robbing a bank.
Well, there you go. He was also in the Flintstones, The Borrowers, King Ralph, and Arachnophobia, The Big Lebowski, Clifford's Really Big Movie, Argo.
You've chosen some amazing ones here. No Roseanne, no Monsters Inc. Nothing people
I'm
actually
cherry picking.
remember.
Cherry picking the best, Rob. 10 Cloverfield Lane, Atomic
Yeah.
Blonde, and he's had 11 Emmy nominations.
Wow.
Then we've got Jean Jourdain, who plays Second Lieutenant Jean-Claude Clément. And he has been, of course, in lots of French films, lots of Hollywood movies once he crossed over. In terms of sort of military-esque roles, he's been in the OSS 117 series, which is like a French spy comedy series of films. Return of the Hero, which is like a Napoleonic farce, which looks really good. Actually, I watched a trailer for that. I haven't seen it, but it looks good. He was in An Officer and a Spy in 2019, which was interesting. And he's, of course, won 1 Oscar.
For the artist, which he robbed off Gary Oldman. I can't let that
contentious
slide.
for Rob. Then we've got Bob Balaban. Balaban.
Balaban. Bob Balaban.
Then we've got Bob Balaban, who was in the original 1970 version of Catch 22.
Wow.
He was in Jacob the Liar in 1999 with Robin Williams, which is a film. Then we've got Wormwood, 2017.
That's staying in. Which is a film. Oh, Christ.
It's a really odd film. It's a ghetto, Polish ghetto, Warsaw ghetto
Oh
film
wow.
with
Okay.
Robin Williams, where he pretends to have a radio, and he kind of gives the ghetto hope. It's a very unusual film. We could actually do it on the pod.
That sounds
Um,
interesting, actually. Yeah.
yeah. Then we've got Condor, 2018, and of course one Oscar nom.
Yes.
Then we've got Hugh Bonneville, Startle Gluff in 1993. He was the air officer on the destroyer in Tomorrow Never Dies in 1997. He was in The Glorious 39 in 2009. And of course, he was in a mildly successful TV show and franchise called Downton Abbey,
I thought you were going to say
amongst
W1A
many
there.
other things. Yeah, for you. Yeah, he was in
Yeah, I love
W1A.
that show. It's fantastic.
And then we have no Oscar
Did you not have
noms
an Oscar
for
nom? No, oh,
the
none. No, I
no,
was going to
not for
say,
that one.
yeah.
Yeah,
BAFTA
he's one of the
noms,
few.
surely.
Yes, I think we
National
can.
Television Awards, at
I think
least.
I think so. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Then we've got Kate Blanchett, who plays an interesting character, Claire Simone, who is based on Rose Valland, or Valland, I suppose
She
you would
could have
pronounce it
just
in
been
French.
Rose Valland. That's one of my biggest
Honestly, like,
issues with this movie.
why is there not a Rose Valland film?
Yeah. That's in my
Anyway,
notes
more on that
later on,
later.
anyway. Sorry, yeah.
Kate's, best known for her roles in the two Elizabeth films, The Aviator, I'm Not There, Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull, Lord of the Rings, 8 Oscar noms, 2 wins.
Amazing.
Absolutely incredible. Then we've got Dimitri Leonidas, who plays Sam Epstein. And he was in Centurion in 2010, Renegades in 2017. He's going to be in Masters of the Air and a series called For Those About to Die, which is a gladiator sort of series, which is on the cards, apparently. And then we have Justus von Donahy, I think it's pronounced. I apologize, Justus, if I've mispronounced that terribly. And he was the SS officer Victor Stahl. He was in The World Is Not Enough in 1999. Before the Fall in 2004, and he was in Downfall in 2004 as well.
Nice.
And then we have to mention Nick Clooney, who plays old George Clooney or old Frank Stokes in the film when he visits Bruges in what looks like the 70s at the very end of the film.
Also, shout out Miles Jupp, very successful British comedian who plays the officer Major, of the 51st Highland Division, which is a lovely little. If you're British and you like, if you watch Mock the Week and all them kind of shows back in the day, you'll know who Miles Jupp is. Very good comedian. I like him.
He plays Major Fielding.
Major Fielding, yeah, he's great in it. Nice to see him as well. And Sam Heseltine plays another officer in it as well.
Yes, Colonel Langdon.
That's it. He was in Slow Horses. He played one of the
Slow Horses. He was in The War Below.
That's it. That's where I blooming knew him from.
Yeah, he's going to be in a couple of other things coming up. I forget exactly what he's got on the cards. I think he's he was recently in The Last Duel as well, wasn't he? Well, it's a very, very strong cast. Very strong.
Like,
you look at that on paper and you think, Jesus, this film is going to be powerhouse, and it just isn't.
It has its problems, and I do think because we could wax lyrical about this, but I want to save it for final thoughts. We will be here forever.
Yeah, totally.
So maybe we should get into the alley tally, because this film had some redeeming features before we get into the nitty gritty and we take a bite of that poop sandwich that the movie can be sometimes. Let's get into the alley tally.
Poop sandwich. That's the first use of the term poop sandwich we've had on the pod. That's for sure.
I just wanted to self-censor.
It's time for Alley Tally on Fighting on Film.
So I'll kick off. I think I might get some flack for this, but I think it's perhaps one of the more accomplished war movies in terms of set dressing, equipment, and uniforms of the last 10 years from Western cinema.
I'm gonna say it. The mise en scène of this film is on point.
It's exquisite.
It really is impressive.
There is so much going on. So Louise Frogley, she led the costume department, and her credits include Iron Man, Casino Royale, and she's a 4-time Costume Design Guild Award winner. And boy, does it show. So my pick this week for the Alley Tally is the uniforms and the webbing and everything else. So you have US, British, German, and Soviets all in one movie. I don't think we've had that on the show
in Northwest Europe.
In Northwest Europe, yeah. So, and they all look right. There's nothing I could pick out that looked wrong. I mean, you've got a couple of guys are wearing pistol holsters, which I'm not sure they would have had, but then the Monuments Men may well have had sidearms. I don't know enough about an individual kit of the Monuments Men to say that's wrong. But there's just small things that someone somewhere is taking a lot of effort into getting right. So when Clooney and co get off the landing craft, you've got Jean and you've got Hugh Bonneville's character wearing battle dress and 37 webbing and number 4 rifles. You've got the American Monuments Men wearing American kit, and it's all M42 stuff. And they've got they've even got down to their life belts around their waists, which is lovely. But then later on in the movie, you see a representation of Christmas time, 1944. And in that scene and after, everyone starts wearing M43 uniforms. And that is such a really, really nice thing, because the American Army did switch to M43 in the latter half of 1944. It was ready to go for D-Day, but they just the thing is, I think they didn't have enough, or they were still making them, or they just weren't issued yet. But that is such a lovely little thing. And then you got Bob Balaban knocking around in a Mackinac coat, very Ernie Pyle-esque. The Germans have Feldgrau, and later on they have their smocks and camo. And I looked up some prop websites, so I was trying to find out who did the propping, but I couldn't really work it out. Couldn't find a name attached, a company. But there's even small things in there, like recreating documents, listing artwork that the Monuments Men would have had on them at the time. Just, it's really small things like that. It really builds the movie up. It's not like a one tent in a field. There's 30, 40 tents. There's troops going across in the background. There's period vehicles going past. It builds it so well. And that's my pick.
It does that thing that Fury does well, is where it builds depth of field, where you have stuff going on in the background, and the more you look, the more you notice, sort of thing.
That's it. Yeah. And we have one instance of the Bedford Report. It's back for a week. There is one Beddy. I found it. It's a Bedford QLD in the armoured column where Clooney and Chloe drive past a British truck column, which is really nice. But there's Opel Blitzes in there, GMC Deuce and a Halves, Greyhounds. There's
Audi
even
staff car.
Audi staff car. There's even a
M8
recreated Greyhound for the film Gaz BA-64 armoured car, a Soviet one.
Yes.
And for me, that's just crazy.
It's in it for literally 30 seconds.
Yeah.
It's like 2 scenes.
And they've all got gazes, and they've got like the trucks that the Soviets used. I can't remember the name of them, but I'm like, the level of detail going on is just, it's mad. And on a 70 million budget as well. Like, I was so impressed.
That's very true, actually. That is true. It's the same for weapons. Like, if I just dial in on weapons for a moment, like, it is impressive because everyone has a correct, weapon. Like, as you mentioned, they mostly have M1 carbines. Some M1 Garands in there. Matt Damon has a Thompson at the very end of the film. There's a training montage where there's chaps firing pistols, and there's an English guy next to Bob Balaban who has a Webley. Hugh Bonneville's character carries an Enfield number 2 Mark 1 with the hammer spare, and then Jean-Claude carries a Enfield number 2 Mark 1 Star with the bobbed hammer. It's impressive because there is an awful the Soviets. There's PPSH 41s. There's a DP light machine gun. There's M38 Mosins. There's a Dushka on the back of one of the Ural trucks.
Ural. That's it.
The young Hitler-Jürgen kid has a Steyr Mannlicher. Like a full length World War One, 1895.
Yeah.
1895.
In a small way, showing the issues of rifles that the Germans get into at the end of the war. Even if it's unintentional, it's doing it.
I mean, they've probably looked at a thing and gone, "Oh, he's got a Steyr, like this Hitler Youth has got a Steyr Mannlicher." And I love that scene. It's a nice little nod to like the Bridge of Remagen, actually.
It is actually
that sequence. and a couple of other films actually, to be fair. But as we said, the mise en scène is really good. I mean, the uniforms, even for background, is really good. I mean, there's an M45 quad M2 Browning in the back of
nice.
a truck. There's an M8 Greyhound. There's copious trucks, copious scout cars. It's an impressive
for a
collection
movie that
of
gets lambasted so much for its story, you can't go hard on it for its authenticity in terms of kit and equipment.
For that, definitely.
Because it as well, it's even just down to scenes where, for instance, when Bonneville's trying to find the statue, St. Michael, he goes to that chateau, or it's like a ruined building, and you've got British troops that have clearly taken it and they're holding it, and they've got the Jerry troops as prisoner there. But and even that in the background, I was looking and I was like, well, that guy's weapons, yeah, that's perfect, yeah. That guy's, it's all there. And I think that's another thing that irks me about this movie, where I'm like, you've got everything right. Like,
a couple of the maps were a bit too
iffy,
modern.
But maps in movies are a bit iffy. We found that on the show.
Absolutely. But that is purely because military maps are very hard to read at a glance on screen.
Right, okay.
In this case. In other films like PT 218 or whatever
they're just not the right map.
No,
they're just weird maps that they found somewhere else.
Go back and listen to that episode if you haven't already, because there's a diatribe on maps.
It's quality.
I think in this case, it's simply because it's at a glance, they're pointing to places and it needs to be clear. But as you said, they recreated documents, and there's recreations of the diary that Rose Valland kept over the movements of all of the different pieces of art. That's recreated, and there's a level of detail that the costume and prop department went to, which is really impressive.
Yeah, exactly. Like, no, it just feels like no expense spared. And I mean, I think Matt's going to fill us in a little bit on the historical context, because we can't ignore it. Unfortunately, this week, sometimes we gloss over it, we can let it go, but I think that's what irks people as much. So I watched a really good lecture on YouTube earlier, and it was from the Met Museum.
Oh, cool, nice.
And it was by
great museum.
Yeah, it was by Jennifer. Started with Jennifer Mock and a couple of other historians and an art conservationist, and it was the story about the Monuments Men, and they sort of like were underfunded. They struggled to get kit and equipment. But then really interestingly, I didn't even know this. One of the Monuments Men, and I forget his name, I should have written it down, but he produced a field guide about how you conserve and protect artwork and pieces when you find them. And I didn't even know that. And the fact they don't allude to that in the movie is really annoying. Like, it's such simple little things that I'm sure are in the 2009 book. I'm sure they're in there. But it's not breached in the movie. It's not put up for the audience. And I think it would have helped the audience, where, especially me, someone who is quite, I wouldn't say like a Neanderthal when it comes to art, but I'm not clued up on why these paintings are so blooming important. I know
a lot of people are not going to be clued up on Renaissance art.
Exactly.
As a general audience, people just, they'll understand some of the significance of it, but they're not going to know the intricacies of various pieces which are mentioned.
Yeah, of
like
course.
The Madonna in Bruges and such.
Yeah.
Like,
why the statue at the end is so blooming important to so many people.
Yeah.
And I feel the movie tries, but it doesn't. Like, you could have easily had a sequence where someone finds a painting and they try and rip it off a wall, and one of the monuments there and goes, "Oh, hang on, no, don't move that." You could that's one of the most important paintings in the Christian faith. Like, please leave it alone. We have to deal with this properly. There's
a really nice Monet. Don't move that.
Yeah, exactly. There's moments where I feel, and then the movie does a thing where it bludgeons you over the head with it later on, when Balaban finds that Picasso painting and it's been burnt and it says Picasso on it, and I'm like, because that's one of the most famous artists you could have featured, but there are countless artists and artworks that were preserved, even things down to like chairs and bells and things like that. The movie doesn't, this is what annoyed me, the movie doesn't quantify enough the level of artwork stolen, the sheer scale of it all, it doesn't really. I mean, it does because you see warehouses full of stuff, but
Yeah.
in human terms, apart from a few quite on the nose speeches by Clooney and Damon, it doesn't really nail down why their work was so chuffing important.
The problem for me is that it doesn't. Each of the characters don't sell why it's individually important to them that they're doing this work.
Yes.
And I know that's a very difficult thing to do cinematically, but it struck me that like some of these people are just there and they're just there to be there.
Yeah.
That's what it felt like. Whereas in reality, they were all passionate art historians, art collectors, artists.
Some of the most revered men in their fields. Like they weren't there just because Clooney said, "Oh, hey, I'm putting a team together, guys. Let's go find some of
that montage at the beginning does kind of do that. But anyway, let's talk a little bit about the historical accuracy of the film.
Sure.
Then we'll loop back round and then we'll talk about favorite scenes and then we'll have a bit more of a deep dive. So in 2013, Clooney told the Entertainment Weekly that 80% of the story is still completely true and accurate, and almost all of the scenes happened. Which that's a tall claim for any historical film. That really is a tall claim. And it's simply not the case. Broadly speaking, the story is true. But I wouldn't say
there were genuine monuments men doing this. Yeah,
I wouldn't say it's accurate in terms of historical accuracy. And I wouldn't say that almost all the scenes happened. Because I'll talk about a couple of them in a moment, but
sure.
They did find instances which they incorporated into the plot. But of course, it's a film. They have to take creative liberties and artistic license with all of this to make it flow as a piece of cinema. So Clooney himself, if we take him, he's based on Lieutenant George Stout, who was a World War I veteran, and he was at the Fogg Art Museum, I think in New York, Harvard, I think. He was an art conservationist, and in 1942, late 42, he made an effort to talk to the War Department about protecting art and tried to launch a program, but he was kind of rebuffed. At the same time, so this is difficult to show in a film, but at the same time, in North Africa and Libya, there's a British colonel who is also an art historian, and he realizes that war is going to damage important historical artifacts, and he goes to a number of sites in Libya and tries to protect them, reroutes traffic, that sort of thing. Then in 1943, Paul Sachs, who worked with Stout, who isn't sort of portrayed in the film at all. Sachs was also at the Fogg Art Museum. I think it's Fogg. And essentially, he was approached and asked to set up a project, a group of people that could consult with the War Department and give advice on protecting art. And they were supposed to give a list of places where things that could be at risk will be, and also things to look out for, that sort of stuff. But he brought Stout in, which is what George Clooney's character is based on, who George Clooney's character is based on, and he kind of put him into one of the lead roles. Another character, if we take Jeffries Bonneville's character, he's based on Ronald Balfour, who was a British officer, who he was killed in the line of duty as well, but he wasn't shot by a German trying to protect the statue. He was actually killed in Cleve when he was trying to evacuate. Exactly, by a shell burst when he was trying to evacuate some civilians and also some artifacts from a bombed church.
That would have been a much harder hitting scene to show.
It would have, yeah.
Because it would have shown them not only taking care of the art, but trying to take care of people as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
because what the film tries to do, but doesn't always manage, is it tries to link humanity to culture. And if you manage to link art and also, the humane act of trying to save civilians, that's a much more successful way of doing it, because without humans, there's no art. Without art, there's no humans. That's kind of the broad appreciation of culture.
A really simple sequence of people being at the church, trying to help protect the paintings or whatever. Bonneville turning up with a couple of other chaps being like, right, let's help you get the artwork out. and then him being hit by a shell burst, evacuating the people, would have been 100% harder hitting, because it would have shown exactly what these guys were trying to do. Not only save the art, but save the people around the art. Like it's there for you. Like it, and equally, we're robbed of a Cleve representation in a movie, which we've never blooming had. Like,
that is true.
It annoys me on another level, but his death is one of the most egregious parts of the movie for me. And you have the letter writing over the
You
top.
don't even see the death. He's shot off screen.
He's shot off screen. It's not. It just doesn't work. It's annoying,
So
and it's a waste of
I
Hugh
read
Bonneville.
a 2014 article in The Guardian that talked about how unhappy his family were with the representation, because on the Monuments Men website, they linked up Balfour's character with Balfour's photograph with Jeffrey's character, sort of like side by side, and Jeffrey's character isn't a straightforward person. He's quite complex in that he has a checkered past. He's done some embezzlement, done some fraud. His father's bailed him out. So not only was his death misrepresented, but also his character was kind of besmirched by the film. So I'm not surprised that Balfour's family wasn't particularly pleased with that.
Yeah, there's a line in behind the scenes piece of footage that I watched, and thinking about it now, I don't know whether it's Hugh Bonneville being tongue in cheek or being on the nose, but he goes, "Oh, see, all these guys have got helmets on in the landing craft. I'm just wearing a beret because I'm the token Brit." Interesting. Yeah. I wonder if he's trying to say something there. Maybe I'm clutching. Maybe I'm not. We'll never know. But yeah, mishandling of that did annoy me a little bit.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Monuments Men, the unit itself, or the Monuments, Fine Arts and Archives section of the Civil Affairs of the Western Allied
they
Armies.
They never say in the movie. They never say the
full name actually was.
They never give the
that its
full
peak
title.
Was 348, 350 people strong. Yeah. And it wasn't only men, it was also women as well, which are underrepresented in the film, obviously.
100%.
Not at all, because Blanchett's character wasn't actually a member of the Monuments Men.
No. But then she later was.
Yeah. She obviously
Rose Valland
later played a massive part
Huge role.
Resecuring French, not only private but also national pieces of art. And she was awarded the Legion d'honneur. She got streets named after her, wrote a great book. Talk more about her in a moment, in fact. But 14 nations. There was 350 people from 14 different nations, and you get the token Brit, you get the token Frenchman, but the film doesn't really try and convey that. And what I think I also found was interesting was that it always shows them working in pairs or as a group, where in reality it was Monuments Men, often individuals, being sent out with groups of just regular soldiers who were sort of like the labor that could secure an area, package things, or
of course,
help inventory. Whereas in the film, it's just 6 guys that are just running across Northwest Europe, trying to like just save all the art.
Yeah, exactly.
Like 2 million pieces, like 20 million pieces of art are saved by 6 guys.
And that's where it is annoying. And I think that's where it rankles for a lot of people, because how hard would it have been to say, right, here are our 6 guys, but then Murray goes off with a squad of chaps. Balaban goes off with a squad of chaps. You maybe have the core together going through it somewhere else. And this is where the episodic nature comes in. And maybe we should get on to final favourite scenes before we go into any of that.
I've got a little bit more before we move on. So I want to talk a little bit about Blanchett's character, Claire, who is obviously based on Rose Valland. She was an employee, just like the character at the Jeu de Paume Museum in Paris, who did secretly record the whereabouts of all the artifacts that the Nazis were stealing, because she could speak German, but they didn't know that. There were no romantic links with any of the Monuments Men, which the film shoehorns in and is irritating as hell and unnecessary.
It wants to get in its 50 style love B-plot.
Yeah, it does. But it's just not needed.
It doesn't work.
It just isn't needed. There's no chemistry. It's just flat. Anyway, that's for final thoughts as well. But she wrote a book in, I think, 1957, 58 called The Art Front. And that book served as the inspiration for the 1964 Burt Lancaster film, The Train. Which, if you want to see a film about the stolen art being spirited out of Paris with some urgency behind it, some actual urgency behind it, then watch The Train, because The Train captures the urgency of and the wrenching of that art out of Paris by the Nazis, essentially stealing the French cultural heart. The Monument Men doesn't capture them.
No,
it's just Kate Blanchett's a little bit miffed. Yeah, Kate Blanchett's a little bit miffed that this is happening.
Yeah,
she has a good scene where she like runs to the train yard and she's stood on the bridge, and I think
the guy takes
like
pot
fires
shots at her.
a Luger at her, and she
I'm like,
stands
why is
there.
he doing
That's
that?
hard as nails. I liked that.
It's cool,
but it never happened.
It shows her resoluteness, but it's hackneyed. It's forced.
I mean, her life would make a great film on its own.
I've got that in my notes. It could and should be a biopic of its very own, because without her, you don't have the ledger full of where everything's gone. Yeah. Without her, the job is 10 times harder.
The film portrays her in prison when Damon comes to meet her.
Yes.
She was arrested until her character was vouched for. She was thought of as a collaborator because she worked at the museum. They didn't realize that she stayed working at the museum because she wanted to keep track of what the Nazis were doing with the actual art itself. And then one final point is the Hitler-Nero decree, which the kind of final act of the film is a crux around. It's a major plot point in that the art is being specifically targeted for destruction because of the Nero decree, which said that once the Reich looked like it was going to fall or Hitler was killed, you would destroy important infrastructure, important bridges, telecommunications equipment, that sort of stuff. Art was never specifically mentioned in that, although there were a number of SS officers that considered art to be
but there were four declarations during the war about art and things like that given by Hitler throughout the war. It's in that lecture that I watched.
Yeah.
So why couldn't they just said that?
Yeah.
Why couldn't they have just layman's termed it for the audience rather than making up something and amalgamating?
What surprised me too was they kind of point that as a specific order for the systematic destruction of art. Yeah. Whereas in reality, the only real systematic destruction of art was of what Nazis considered degenerate art. So sort of like cubism, surrealism, that sort of stuff that wasn't the classical traditional sort of art styles. And the film just glosses over that.
It does. And that's where it's annoying. It just does a lot of glossing.
It does. And it's a classic example of Hollywood simplifying the story, with a pinch of artistic license.
But that's fine if it's done well and respectfully.
Yes.
And this doesn't quite do one. It doesn't quite do the other.
No, the film is on the cusp of it, isn't it, really? It doesn't quite manage it.
Right, let's get into favourite scenes, because we were in trouble of completely tarnishing this entire movie, and there are some sequences that are okay. Really, there are, listeners.
Hello, I'm Al Murray, and you're listening to Fighting on Film, the world's #1 war film podcast.
I know we've just said in the Ali Tally section about the historical context and things the movie gets wrong, but I think there are some things that the movie does get right. So it's an ensemble piece, and you've got some of the most beloved, funny actors from the 80s in Goodman and Murray. You've got Clooney, who, love him or hate him, I personally do quite enjoy Clooney films. I think he's a very old 60s, 50s style actor in a modern era. I think that's his thing. He's like a sort of, he's a
Cary Grant.
He's a Cary Grant, a Burt Lancaster of his time. James Stewart-esque guy. And this movie, in a way, I think as well, I think this movie Clooney is trying to evoke those 50s, 40s war movies. You get a very sort of the tongue-in-cheekness of Guns of Navarone. You get the actiony bits from something like Bridget Remagen. You get
even in the editing, there's sweeping shots of vehicles moving, and that helps you transition to a new location, a new scene. That sort of Yeah,
Yeah,
there's a
exactly.
feel to it.
The movie as a movie is fine in terms of editing, and not sorry, in terms of camera work, in terms of the way it's like you see it on screen is fine. But I've got final thoughts. We'll cover that. Don't worry. But my favorite scene is and it's a funny section because the thing the movie annoys me at where it can't find the tone between the comedy and the seriousness of the situation that you're in, and it felt like the script needed a few more goes to try and work that out. But there is one section that I do find funny. I like it. It's when Matt Damon stands on the landmine, because for me that's when the comedy and the seriousness comes in, because someone is directly in danger, and it's not going to affect like the historical accuracy of the movie in that way, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It's not actually about the monuments men and what they're doing in the situation. It's, oh god, I've stepped on a landmine. And all the chaps come out, and Bill Murray's like, well, it'll be a dud, like they've burned this place down, like surely it was not going to work. And they devise this sort of like wooden beam for Damon to hold on to, and he can step off. And then when it goes off, there's like a flash and nothing happens. And he doesn't go on one, he goes on two. And you get Murray going, well, I told you it was a dud. And in that section, I feel like all the guys feel like a unit. They feel they've been through a lot. Two of their members have died. I mean, say less about their deaths because I think they're played quite cheaply. I think Jean-Claude's death is played for laughs. I didn't like the way they did that, of him being in that field with the Germans on one side, the Americans on the other. And I'm sitting there
kind
thinking,
of
am I
flailing
meant
around
to
jump in into the
am I
truck.
meant to find this funny? Like it tonally was really off. But that sequence there, Matt Damon's bit, because it made me chuckle, and the comedy actually worked. It's fine. Like I like that scene, and there's a few other bits that work fine for me, like them coming onto Normandy Beach is nice because you get the
Yeah, that was
scale of
quite good.
everything. Obviously, the sequences where they're moving through, although the representations might not be 100% correct, I think the majority of representations of Allied troops in staging areas, in encampments, just being around the place feels quite nice. It works. But all my other issues are going to be in final thoughts. So Matt, maybe you should do your favorite scene.
So the mine that Matt Damon steps on is a Telemine 35, which is actually an anti-tank mine.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
And
Didn't know that.
the minute if I'm right from the book I had a quick look at, because I am that guy.
Mine expert Matthew Moss.
Not a mine expert. Don't quote me
Mine
on that.
Matters with Matthew Moss on the
Oh,
Fighting on
my
Film
word.
podcast.
Yeah. Wow. The minimum trigger weight is about 200 pounds. So Matt Damon must have weighed over 200 pounds.
Well, they do make a joke about that, don't they? Because they say, how much do you weigh? And he goes, 173 pounds. And they go, really? And he goes, 173 pounds in grad school. So it is implied that he weighs a lot more.
But yeah, it's just a little tidbit there I thought I had to throw in.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
My favorite scene is actually one of the better sort of choreographed and framed sequences. Bill Murray's character has a toothache, and they go to a dentist near Aachen, I think, and they're chatting to the dentist, and the dentist says, "Oh, I have a nephew who was in Paris during the occupation. He likes art. He might be able to help you." So they go, "Okay, great," and they drive out there to his house. Very Bavarian, very beautiful. So sort of like farm, and they're given tea. They're sat around a big dining room table, and they're chatting about oh, you were in Paris, and he says, "I was in Paris, but I wasn't really an officer. I was just doing my
Because he's
job."
the big bad from the start, isn't he?
He's the big bad. He's Stahl, yeah. And during this sequence, Bob Balaban is circling the room, and the room is quite noticeably
It's chocker full of paintings,
daubed
isn't it?
with a lot of quite famous and notable paintings.
It's like Dulwich Art Gallery in there. It's got it all going on. Dulwich Art Gallery is one of the premium art galleries in London. I love it.
And he's looking at the back of paintings, and Maury's making small talk. He makes his way around the edge of the table, and he goes, "Do you know the Rothschilds?" And he says, "No, I don't know the Rothschilds." And he sits down. He goes, "These paintings, they're great, aren't they?" And he says, "Yeah, they're all copies. They're all fake.
Yeah.
Like, I can't afford the real thing."
Got them
Um,
HMV in the poster section. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. They're all prints, mate. They're all prints.
All
And
prints, yeah.
one of 5,000. And Balaban says, "Well, that literally has property of the Rothschild family stamped on the back of it."
It's a good line.
Um,
It's good. That sequence is quite funny. I'll give you that.
and the Stahl's face is just ashen, and the
Yeah.
camera pans across, and it to Maury, and he's sat there with his 1911 on the table, and it's
Yeah.
great, and with just in a beat, Balaban turns to Stahl's kids who are playing on the other side of the room and says, "Heil Hitler," and they snap to attention and shout "Heil Hitler" back to him.
Yeah.
And it's a very well done
It is.
sequence, which
Because Murray and Balaban sell it.
Yeah. And it's one of the sequences in the film that has a little bit of weight to it.
It does. Yeah.
I would
And
say.
it's just desserts for how cruel that man was at the start.
Exactly. And apparently it was based on a real situation.
Okay.
But the German didn't have the actual stolen art hung on the wall. But his father-in-law, the dentist, did take the character that Bill Murray, the actual real chap that Bill Murray's character is based on, to his house because he knew he'd been in Paris, and he'd helped, had an interest in art, and he inadvertently did take him to quite a senior SS officer's house who had been involved in spiriting all the art away.
Oh, okay. So it's a decent amalgamation. You could have had that sequence in full. Really, wouldn't have hurt.
But that pretty much is the sequence. Just a couple of tweaks, a little bit more snappy for cinema's sake.
I like how smug Murray and Balaban look when they're in the Jeep with him at the end. I really like that. It's really cute.
There's another Balaban scene which I'll just mention very briefly, but there's a montage of where they're training, and it pans past some chaps doing pistol training, and Balaban's on the end, and he's got a Smith & Wesson military and police revolver, and he just empties the revolver, swings out the cylinder, empties it, and then slaps it back in with a flick of the wrist, and then holsters it. He's very cold in that sequence, and the scene that follows where he's like, "I want to kill someone.
Yeah.
I want to kill a German. Are we going to get to kill people?" I'm like, "Oh, okay. Bob Balaban is gunning for people."
Bob Balaban got that dog in him.
Yeah.
I like the bit where Murray
Balaban
gets
going hard.
Another thing I like the little, although I think it's rushed and it annoys me, I do like the sequence where they get into kit, and you've got Goodman with his helmet on. They give him a liner and it's too small, and then they give him the full helmet, and he like pushes it up like a hat and like walks off nonchalant. I love that. Murray getting his M1 carbine, he puts it on his shoulder like stripes. That was really nice. And then I think this is going to slide in to final thoughts very seamlessly here. And therein lies the fucking rub with this movie, right? It feels like a series of vignettes. It is really, really episodic. And I think the issues with that tonal shift in the edit that people speak about, and Clooney's mentioned, is where it falls down. It feels like you've supercut a series together. Because I would much rather if this had been... it's the wrong thing to sort of liken it to, but I wanted it to be more like a combat-esque series. Half-hour little shorts where we're like, right, this week it's Murray and Balaban with a crew of, maybe like a 29th Infantry Div platoon, and they stumble across a dentist, and the dentist says there's paintings, and they find the paintings, and then at the end you get these are the paintings and things that were found. Next week you have Bonneville in the Reichswald trying to save these paintings and the people he gets killed off. Yeah. It feels like that, and that's where the tone stuff and the constant muddling of it all. Like the first half for me is just so rushed. It throws everything at you super quick. Here, paintings are going to be broken and ripped and destroyed. this really important statue, St. Michael, is going to be, blown to bits if we're not careful. Mr. FDR, can you please let us go and do this? Well, that's your opening episode, isn't it? Yeah. And then you get the whole muddled bit with Valand and her and boiling her down to a plot device, essentially. And it really gets my goat. But then by the second half, after they've had the two deaths and they're trying to find the mine at the end, that feels like its own arc, and it's much stronger because it's one thing rather than them shooting off episodically, which I feel is where the movie falls down. Because I would have much rather have seen a 6-10 episode.
Why does Matt Damon go behind enemy lines?
Exactly.
He's not
it's
OSS.
So muddled. Yeah, and it just.
I did actually. I just to pick a couple of those comedic moments that did work. Blanchett spitting in the champagne glass at the beginning was funny.
Yeah.
Everyone ripping Matt Damon's terrible French, classic.
It's funny. Yeah, it goes a bit a lower lowy, I think.
How do you know? You never watched it?
Well, I watched some of it after We Have Ways. So, yeesh.
Scrambling.
That's not one of my favorite things.
That's
Didn't
great.
like that.
That's great. No, it's great.
Nope. I'm a Secret Army man.
It's a homage to Secret Army.
That's why I don't like it. Because I much prefer Secret Army.
I haven't watched Secret Army, so maybe once I watch Secret Army, I'll be like, oh no, Hello's ruined for me because Secret Army's so much better.
You're just picking on me now, Matt.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with what you said there. And as we said earlier, the Valan character could have easily had her own film.
Yeah.
And
or just be Valand. Like, what's the harm?
Yeah, I know. We talked about this, didn't we? We talked about this when we were both watching it, and we said that her character would have been better left out of this film if they really wanted to nail down the Monuments Men.
Yeah.
Because either go hard on that character or strip it right back. Because there's no need for that romantic sequence. There's no need for that. The one part of that actual sequence which I did really like was when they go to that warehouse which is full of reclaimed Jewish furniture, stuff that had been taken from French Jewish families and put in a warehouse.
That hit home,
and that was good. And I liked the little sequence where Damon's character takes the one painting of probably the mother and takes it back to the house that it was from. It's empty, it's derelict, and he puts it back on the wall, and it's sort of like
powerful
for when or if any of their family come back. We
needed fucking more of that.
That was good
because it finally connected the people to the art.
But what I didn't like was the very much on the nose speeches from Clooney's character, which the first one, okay, it's setting up things.
Yeah,
there's a couple of others along the way which are just like, I would rather have had it more organic, where each of the individual characters explains why art is important to them. I don't really need a number of different speeches from Clooney to do that. Also,
agreed.
One of the sequences which didn't sit flush with me, I would say, I didn't mind it, I didn't hate it. It's a good scene, in that it's kind of like what you would imagine you would love to say to someone in that situation if you had the chance and you had thought it beforehand. It's the scene where Clooney confronts the captured SS Colonel.
I knew you were going to say that. I knew it.
And he just slates the guy, and he knocks him down in such a way, and it's brilliant. It's great. Like, it's the kind of way you wish you could talk to an SS Colonel. Put him in his place.
And I assumed he was insinuating that the diner is a Jewish-owned diner.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
I assume that's what he was getting
absolutely.
at.
Absolutely, totally. Yeah.
Yeah. Or better still, instead of having the bit at the end where you have the old Clooney, have that sequence.
Diner. Yeah, that would have been good.
Chop up some of the bits at the start, chop them off a bit, and have them after the war, showing what they did was so important. Yeah.
Similarly, that sequence is supposed to show that people, the saving of that piece of art matters to people. but it's just a small tour group in a church. They should have
Yeah.
had like a group of people and a tour guide explaining the significance of the statue and the significance of the fact that 30 years ago, a group of people recognized the importance of it and saved it.
Yeah.
That would have been more
Because the tour
effective
guide could
than
have said
just
that.
than Nick Clooney going, yeah.
Yeah, tour guide could have said
Just
that to the group. Have that sequence longer. Tour guy says that to the group. The group filter out. An old guy and the young lad stay.
Yeah.
And Clooney points at the statue.
He
and
pulls
goes,
out of his pocket a bagel with Sal's Diner written just on the piece of paper
and takes a bite.
Yeah.
That would have been nice. That would have been nice. Or my way would have done, well, this is the statue I told you about, kid.
Yeah.
Something like that. And that's why it's important, because then it links it again. And I would have liked to see more of Clooney's dad, because he looked great. There's nothing wrong. I think that's the issue with it. There's nothing particularly wrong with these scenes. It's how they're dealt with and how they're mashed into that final edit. Because this is my final thought, where you've got everything going for you. You've got the cast, nothing wrong with them. You've got the set dressing, the mise en scène, the camera work. It's all perfectly fine. And I think it's way, way better than this movie deserves, right? Because imagine having another mid-budget war film around this time, like on the coattails of Fury, with this level of kit and everything else, attention to detail in it.
It's clearly a passion project.
Of course,
clearly cared about it.
And you listen to the behind the scenes stuff, and all the actors say it was fantastic on set. Clooney's a great director to work for. He brings a level of professionalism, but he's also really fun, and we felt so relaxed. And John Goodman's even said it was one of the best experiences of his career because it reignited him, because he was going through some personal issues at the time. It seems like everyone had an absolute hoot on this film, but then it's that final edit and the tonalness of it and the episodic nature of it. And I have read a lot of contemporary reviews on it, and I do agree with them. This may have been better as a series. And that is
I agree.
My final issue with it. Everything is about that edit doesn't pay off for me. And that's why it's annoying. It's more annoying than anything else.
Well, if we go back to the beginning where you talked about some of the issues with getting the film out in time, I think getting that tone right in the edit is one of those things, because you're dealing with a film which has quite clear comedic aspirations, and a number of those moments are included. And there's a number of moments which are, very serious. They deal with the Holocaust, and the human toll of that.
Yeah.
Like the scene with the gold fillings, the scene that we mentioned with Damon and Blanchett in the warehouse, the scene with Epstein, Private Epstein, where he talks about his grandfather that explained to him, we can't go to that museum because we're too short. And then he says all of Europe was too short for Hitler. And that was a really nice line. And
Lovely
it was a
line.
nice little scene. Yeah. But it doesn't come together homogeneously.
No.
To form something that you can really go, that was very good. That was well handled. That was on point in terms of tone throughout, because it just fluctuates. And it makes it a bit more of a middling film.
It makes a monumental task a minimal film.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah, to try and echo the name of the movie really coolly.
We got
like
it.
I hadn't written that in my notes.
We got it.
We got there in the end. But so what you're saying, Matt, is essentially 2 weeks ago, if you listen to the episode where we likened it to Homer Simpson's makeup gun, where it shoots a hell of a lot of things at you and hopes it sticks. Do you still agree with that?
I do. And I agree that it should have been a series that got pad out like a 6-episode series. Great.
In this streaming era of big budget streaming series, Amazon Prime could have easily done something like this.
Yeah,
Apple,
but it
easily.
It's just 5 years too soon.
Exactly.
Isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And I still think I still would recommend people to see it, because it's a great jumping off point to learn more about the monuments themselves.
It was a massive undertaking for just 350 people. I read a couple of parts from Stout's journal where he talks about I haven't got enough men. Just simply can't pack things up fast enough.
Yeah.
And the logistical effort of trying to inventory and save all of these pieces that they found in the mines, they found in trucks, on trains, etc. Incredible.
There's a fantastic
and the film
image.
Doesn't quite.
Doesn't get
that
there.
scope, that scale.
No, there's a fantastic image in the Met lecture, and I'll implore everyone who's listening to the show, please go and find it. I'll link it on the Twitter one day this week, a date recording. There's a picture of one of the ruined buildings that they come across, and they're going to use it to house reclaimed paintings and artwork and pieces. And it's bombed out. It's rubble. It's destitute. It's soot all over the walls. There's rubble everywhere. And in 2 weeks, by the Monuments Men, and I'm sure a lot of help from a lot of GIs or British troops or whoever, it's been transformed into this pristine, clean environment where all these paintings are housed perfectly in little wooden frames, and it's been completely redone. And I thought to myself, they fucking cared so much, and the movie just doesn't quite convey that. And if the movie could have shown you that, from taking this bombed out nothing of a building that looked like it wasn't fit for anything to then house some of the most important paintings in human history in the space of 2 weeks, that would have been enough. And I think that's where I'm going to end it, because I think that shows the level of what these guys were doing.
You look at the number of Oscar nominees, you look at the talent attached to this film.
Exactly.
It's just a bit of a wasted opportunity, isn't it?
It is. And I think that is 2014's Monuments Men, a wasted opportunity. And I feel for everyone involved, because clearly they did give a shit. But somewhere...
Yeah. And from that email you read out about Clooney, he clearly wanted it to be a success.
Yeah. No one wants to make a failure, do they? No one does. It's not why you make movies.
As I said, I think it really was a passion project for him.
I'd like to see another Clooney war film, just because I like the amount of care and effort put into it. It's just a shame that the final outcome wasn't 100. But there we have it, folks. That was 2014's The Monuments Men. It's available on all sorts of streaming platforms. You can get it quite easily. DVD of it's quite cheap. But yeah, do join us again next week for more war movie reviews. Keep it fighting on film. Do join us on our socials. You can find us on X, Instagram, Threads, probably Blue Sky at some point, and TikTok as well. So do join us again, and we'll catch you next week. Bye, everyone.
Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye-bye.